Andrea?
My name is Andrea Hodges. I am a biology major and I am a senior.
Thank you. Eduardo?
Hello, my name is Eduardo Rios. I'm a business major and a sophomore at HT.
Thank you. Now I am stumped because I am seeing DWKOMT, M2.
That's me. I'm Jimena. I don't know why it does that. I'm Jimena Rodriguez. I'm a psychology major and I'm a freshman at HT.
Thank you. So now I am going to ask Professor Ceresa to talk with us about what we're in store for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Penikoff. So we've been talking in class about leadership and leaders. And I want to let my students know that here we have some leaders who exemplify exactly what we've been talking about. So I'm talking about Dr. Joy Penikoff and Carlota Garcia. These are the kinds of people we've been talking about when we talk about leaders in the flesh. And they are an example of what's possible and what people can do. And they're accompanied by the staff of CTI, Doug Greco, Catherine Ricker, Monique Vasquez, who are dedicated, committed civic educators who work with institutions across a geography, a large geography. As we hear stories about the things they've accomplished, I want you to think about what you might accomplish in the same vein of the work they're doing. And I just can't be more excited about that idea, right? So we're going to learn about, well, you guys know what leaders are and what they do, because we've been talking about it for weeks now. And these people have done it, and it can be done, and this could be you. And so that's what we're here to see the picture they paint. But I want you to think about you being in their role. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to talk a little bit with y'all about just what is Central Texas Interfaith. And it could be that you've learned from Professor Ceresa some things, but there are some things that are pretty key that I'd like to bring out. Central Texas Interfaith actually originally was called Austin Interfaith. And after being Austin Interfaith, a few years ago, expanded and now is Central Texas Interfaith and covering a geographic area of 10 counties. So we are not just Travis, but we're also Hayes, Williamson, Bastrop, Brazos, McLennan, Kamal, and up and down the I-35 corridor between Austin and San Antonio. We also are including Waco and College Station. Geographically, this is a very important area for the state of Texas. And there are 3 million people who live in these 10 counties. Within these 10 counties, we have organizations that are members of Central Texas Interfaith. So Sierra, you cannot be an individual member of Central Texas Interfaith. I can't be. It is the institutions that we belong to that are members. So it's made up of 50 different organizations. Many of them are churches. You heard me mention Congregational. Ms. Garcia mentioned Our Lady of Guadalupe. And so the way it works is that these are organizations and we leaders are members of those organizations. Also, we have things like unions, we have schools, and the partnership with Houston Tillotson is a beginning of the kind of relationship that we are watching develop and are very enthusiastic about. We have healthcare clinics, nonprofits, so many different kinds of organizations. We are, as Central Texas Interfaith, we are members of a broader network that is the southwest part of the Industrial Areas Foundation, okay? And the IAF has even more organizational members. I'm just trying to look and see how many, but I think it's 60 different memberships that are networks. So the Industrial Area Foundation is the largest community organizing organization in the United States. Now, how does it work? First of all, it is nonpartisan, even though we use political process to get things done, okay? We are not political. We do not endorse any candidates. But what we do is that we talk among ourselves, like in congregational church. We sit down, we have meetings. And out of those small group meetings, we come up with a list of things that we think need to be changed. For example, after the riots or the protests in the summer, we thought that the police force needed to be changed. And that became an agenda item. And there were many organizations within Central Texas Interfaith that felt the same way. And we then got together and made an agenda item, which was police reform. And then how did that play out? Proposition A got defeated, okay? It didn't contain the kind of police reform that Central Texas Interfaith knew needed to happen. So nonpartisan, but we have an agenda. And y'all will hear much more about that this evening. Central Texas Interfaith is made up of a very diverse set of organizations and diverse membership. So we are one of the most culturally, racially, geographically, politically diverse organizations that you will ever see. And the good thing is, me, an old white lady, gets to know Professor Ceresa and Carlota Garcia and Sierra Franklin. And we then are able to talk with each other and to understand the issues that we're concerned about. That is what Central Texas Interfaith can do. And Ms. Garcia.
That was a very comprehensive layout. Thank you. I think just one minor correction is that we are, Dr. Pennicup is exactly correct. We are nonpartisan. We do not back candidates. We do not back parties. But we are political. We are a very political organization. And so we will define issues and we will take positions on issues and we will duke it out with candidates and we'll duke it out with elected officials and we will use the political process to get stuff done. But I just want to clarify, we are a political organization. We are nonpartisan. So you're never going to see us back a candidate. You're never going to see us promote a party, but you will see us take a hard stance and to engage in some real fights around positions that we negotiate with each other. And Dr. Pennicuff is exactly right. There is lots of negotiation between very different people to define where we stand. But once we take a stand, we stand firm together.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garcia. Now, I feel like maybe we've covered pretty much an introduction to CTI. And now I would like to turn it over to our broad-based organizing training for this evening. And Mr. Greco will take over from here.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Pennicuff. Again, I'm Doug Greco, lead organizer with Central Texas Interfaith. I've been with 3 different IAF organizations, but mostly in my 15-year career in organizing, mostly with Central Texas or Austin Interfaith, but also 3 years in San Antonio with our oldest organization and also in Los Angeles. Before that, I was a high school teacher on the east side of Austin when I first came here in the late 90s at what was Johnston High School, but now is Eastside Memorial High. And I got involved in organizing because our school was part of Austin Interfaith at the time. Let me, before I kind of go into our discussion tonight on broad-based organizing, ask if there's any questions or reactions to the layout so far, Dr. Pennicuff or Dr. Sarissa's layout. Any clarifying questions or burning questions so far?
And Mr. Greco, I noticed that we've had some new arrivals. So if you have not, as a student, if you have not introduced yourself yet, may we ask you to do so? And let me start with Timothy.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I didn't get the link, but my name is Timothy. Am I like supposed to like say like what my major is or something?
Yes, please.
Well, my major is computer science, and I want to be IT one day. And I'm a junior.
Very good. Thank you so much. Jasmine.
Hello, how are you? Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm Jasmine Shepard. I'm a psychology major and I'm a sophomore.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Akasha.
Hi, my name is Akasha Saye Chapman. I'm a freshman. I am a psychology major and I plan on being a forensic psychology with my career. Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Very good. Who have I left out?
Me.
I'm sorry, I'm from New Orleans.
Thank you. Okay, Raul.
Hi, my name is Raul Camarena, and I'm originally from the Valley, and my major is exercise science at HC.
Thank you. Pardon us for that interruption, Mr. Greco.
All right. So let me get back to my question as well. Any reactions or thoughts on the layout so far? Okay. Dr. Sarissa, I see you're laughing.
No, I was going to ask Ciara what she thinks because she's a brilliant mind, but I'll let it proceed.
Okay. All right. So the topic for tonight is broad-based organizing, which describes the kind of organizing that we do. Before we kind of dive into that, let me just kind of ask for what comes to mind when you hear the word organizing or political organizing or types of organizing in our history? You know, could be organizations or movements or historical examples of people that were organizers or organized something important. And specifically kind of in the social political world, either current day or historically. I see the NAACP. Great. Kasha. What else? Call it out or put it in the chat. What are other examples of organizing in our history?
Civil rights movement.
Civil rights movement. What else? Raul, any thoughts?
Would the Black Lives Matter movement be a thing?
Absolutely. Black Lives Matter. I put that in the category of movement, kind of a political movement. What are other social political movements?
The farm workers movement.
Farm workers. What is Until Freedom, Clara? Ciara, sorry.
It's kind of like a branch off of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's more about advocating for the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor's,
Okay.
the lost lives.
Great, great. Zakara, any thoughts?
I think everyone mostly said all the ones I was thinking of.
Okay.
I'm still trying to figure out some.
Someone put NAN. What is NAN? Black Panthers. What is NAN? Someone put it there.
Nicholas, that would be.
Nicholas, what is NAN?
It's the National Action Network. So it talks about, it addresses the problems from the political standpoint, so people can get more information on it. So
Okay, great. Is that Reverend Al Sharpton's group, the National Action Network? I think so. Okay. All right. So there's this whole kind of tradition of movements, historically. So you put Black Lives Matter, Black Panthers, Civil Rights Movement, anti-war movement, women's movement, LGBT movement. There's this whole history of movement organizing, which come at kind of pivotal times in our history where oftentimes there's kind of a charismatic leader, not always, but somebody who kind of galvanizes or embodies the movement. And lots of followers, lots of folks that are part of the cause. So that's one strain of organizing. There's another strain that is, we call it either civic organizing or community organizing, very local based organizing, like neighborhood associations or different civic groups. Like where I grew up, there was the lions, the elks, the moose. There were all these animal, but there were all these civic groups, and then they had like all these volunteer fire companies, the Anthracite Hose Company, the Clover Hose Company, and they all had service, and they all had fundraisers, and they all had block parties. So, then there is this tradition of we say what we do is not community organizing because we're broader than any one community, but there is a tradition of community organizing. Like in Austin, there's different groups in different neighborhoods. There's a Restore Runberg group. There's groups on the east side. There's groups in Dove Springs and Central Austin. Some of the Democratic clubs, West Austin Democrats, South Austin Democrats. Those are all kind of local, very local based. And so that's another way that part of our tradition, community organizing. But the type that we're going to talk about today is called broad-based organizing. And we as the IAF, we're not the only organization that is broad-based. You think of the HBCU network. All the HBCUs are, it's basically a network of institutions with some formal and some informal associations, but all have common missions. The AFL-CIO is a broad-based network of unions. A lot of our religious denominations, like Catholic Church or Presbyterian Church or Baptist Church, they're all broad-based and they have some elements that are in common. So we're going to talk a little bit about broad-based organizing in the IAF tradition, but I'm going to preface it by saying it's not the only way to organize. These are all valid ways and effective ways and historically effective ways to organize. The civil rights movement was a movement, and it also had elements of broad-based organizing. It had networks of churches and pastors. The civil rights movement saved the soul of the country. But each strategy, each way of organizing is a bit different, and they change over time. Okay, has anyone ever heard of a guy named Bayard Rustin? Anyone heard of Bayard Rustin? Any of the students heard of him? He is, if you ever get this book called The Lost Prophet, it's one of the best it's the definitive biography of Bayard Rustin, who was the executive director of the March on Washington in 1962, where MLK had his "I Had a Dream" speech, and he was an advisor to Martin Luther King, but had been a pacifist anti-war organizer, was really the leader of the nonviolent movement, kind of follower of Gandhi in the 30s and 40s. And most historians credit him for really kind of passing that on to Dr. Martin Luther King, the tactics of nonviolent resistance. And so he was heavily involved in the civil rights movement and an advisor to the leaders of the civil rights movement on protests and big mass movement actions. And then as soon as the march happened, after it got national attention, he wrote this article called "From Protest to Politics." And he said, up until this point, we had to use protests, marches, and mass actions to get attention and get our seat at the table. In other words, he was saying we were a movement. We had to get media attention. We had to get the president to sit down with us. But now we have to begin to become a broad-based network. We have to begin to work in coalition with unions, with student groups, with liberals, with intellectuals, and create a broad coalition so that we can sit at the table and do politics with the president and with Congress. Because if we're just standing alone as an African-American community, we're going to have, we're only going to have so much power. So we're at the table. Now let's practice power politics, but we got to be in coalition. So movements and broad-based organizing, there's a back and forth, and historically, we kind of borrow from each other. But we're going to talk about kind of the basics of broad-based organizing today. And I'm also going to say Central Texas Interfaith, or an IAF organization, we're not always practicing what we preach. So I'm going to talk about the ideal, what we're doing at our best, and then we can always judge how well we're living up to that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is, what's the purpose of a broad-based political organization? What is the purpose? We say the purpose of a broad-based political organization is to build sustained political power. And that's really what Bayard Rustin was saying in Protest to Politics. Now is the time to build sustainable political power. Now, how would you define power? What does it mean to have power in politics?
Access to decision making.
Okay, so you can be a decision maker or access to decision makers. Okay, anything else?
Building relationships. Basically.
Relationships. Okay, that's very important. How are relationships important to power?
We just went over this. Basically, it's connections. Basically, if y'all are interested in a certain, basically, I guess, agenda, the more people interested in, the better the relationships get. So you can build more people in who are interested in this agenda, and you're more than likely to have a better chance of actually attending to this agenda, basically doing politics, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's the idea of building power that's relational is key to broad-based organizing. We don't want to build power for power's sake, power to push people to make top-down decisions. We want power that is the ability to act on our values. Someone said the ability to lead. Zakara talked about relational power. We call it relational power, the power of relationships. When Bayard Rustin was recommended as the director of the March on Washington, some of the clergy didn't want him to be. Martin Luther King did, but others didn't. And he had a relationship with H. Philip Randolph, who was a big African-American Union leader. So he said, I want to be executive director, A. Philip Randolph said. And they said, okay, you can be executive director. And the first thing he did was, I'm appointing Bayard Rustin as my deputy executive director, and he's running the show. So he had a power of a relationship there, that when he was blocked, somebody else stepped in and leveraged their relationship. So we want power that's relational, and it's also power that's institutional. When we talk about institutions, we're talking about religious congregations, labor unions, schools, universities. Because unless you're a CEO or you're from a family of privilege, most folks who are working class, from working class communities, communities of color, the middle class communities, we're connected to power, you know, through our congregations or through our schools or through our universities or through a union or through a place we work, like a health clinic. Okay, so we want power that's connected to community-based institutions. Okay, but we are talking about political power, and one way to demonstrate that is through voting, and that's how we demonstrate power in a democracy. So I'm going to ask my colleague Monique to talk a little bit about recent Get Out the Vote efforts.
Thanks. As I said before, my name is Monique Vasquez. I'm an organizer with CTI and leader with Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. And as Doug mentioned, so one way that builds sustainable political power is civic engagement. So CTI clergy and leaders recently organized a full-scale Get Out the Vote effort against Proposition A. And that would have forced the city to spend an estimated $271 to $598 million on the police budget over the next 5 years. This is to the potential detriment of other city services. So CTI leaders reached out over the past month to 16,000 voters in their institutions and neighborhoods during a non-candidate election where turnout is typically low. And so a key strategy to this were neighborhood block walks. So neighborhood block walks were conducted by HT students, leaders at Ebenezer Baptist Church, Our Lady of Guadalupe as well, in East Austin. And HT students actually identified and led walks in an apartment complex and engaged many young registered voters about the negative impact of Prop A. So over 2 weekends, East Side block walks reached 600 registered voters and engaged them in conversation. We're really proud to say that Proposition A was overwhelmingly defeated and that CTI leaders and students had a significant impact in this election. So in each of our targeted precincts, opposition to, as far as we can tell for our initial readings, are that in each of the targeted precincts, opposition to Prop A outpaced the county average. And in most cases, it was by double-digit percentages. Ms. Garcia, I might be missing anything, but correct me if that's incorrect. Perfect. And if it's okay, I will just very briefly show a picture of our East Side leaders. So these are our Get Out the Vote leaders who reached 600 residents.
All right, let's give them a hand wave, round of applause. East Side leaders that did this. And if you notice in the story that every one of those leaders was connected to an institution, whether it was Ebenezer Baptist Church, Houston Tillotson, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I'll tell you, and you know this if you ever worked on a campaign or something that wasn't necessarily from the community, when you introduce yourself at the doorstep as a student from Houston Tillotson or a member of Ebenezer Baptist Church, the door opens and people keep the door open in a way that if you were just working for some campaign and you were given flyers and told to walk down, Lydia Street on the East Side. So that our power is institutional, comes from neighborhood institutions, and it's relational. Yes, we did some texting and we want to get to a lot of people by texting, but we don't just want voter contacts, we want voter conversations. So phone banking, conversations in our congregations and at the doorstep. So that's what we mean by sustained political power. It's relational, it's institutional. Okay, I am gonna kind of go to the next, I'm gonna put up a little PowerPoint it's gonna take me a second to, darn it, get this thing out of here. There we go. Let me put the slideshow on. So we talked about purpose of organizing. Let's talk about membership. So as you can tell from Dr. Penikoff's description and how we've been talking, in community organizing, members, you go door to door, their individuals tend to be, or in civic groups. In a movement, it tends to be anyone who is behind the cause or is part of the cause. In a broad-based organization, we don't have individual members, we have institutional members, congregations, schools, universities, health clinics, labor locals. So that's what we mean when we say an institution, okay? Like a civic or religious institution. Now, let me ask you, what do you think are some of the advantages of organizing through institutions? What do you gain by organizing through congregations or schools or labor unions? What do institutions have? What qualities?
They've got people. They've got people.
Got people, networks, pre-existing
Power.
networks of relationships. What else?
You can also build relationships from like schools because of the younger students, you know.
That's right. And the students have parents, and parents have, you know, schools tend to be from a neighborhood. Students are coming from a neighborhood. A lot of our churches used to be that way, but a lot of our churches, folks are coming from all over. Okay, so you've got networks of relationships. You have potential. We always are looking to develop leaders. So there's potential talent in these institutions. Think about how long has Our Lady of Guadalupe been on the East Side, or at least been in Austin overall?
For over 100 years.
Okay. How old is Houston Tillotson University?
146.
146. Ebenezer Baptist is over 140 years old. Okay, Miss Akambala couldn't be here tonight. She's traveling, but so we have a whole cluster of institutions, Mount Olive Baptist Church, Holy Cross Catholic Church, that have been there 100+ years. So they're going to outlast any of us. So while, you know, Doug Greco may come and go, and Dr. Pennicoff may come and go, Ms. Garcia, those institutions are going to be here, you know, if they're not immortal, they're near immortal, you know, being here over 150 years. So as people go in and out in different roles and move in and out, the institution stays. The founding institutions of Central Texas Interfaith were those churches that we mentioned, okay? And they have values and traditions that we can build from: justice, formation of people, citizenship, okay, workers' rights. They have values that we can build off of. So we are an organization of organizations, and we're always looking for new institutions. Like Houston Tillotson has been working with us for a few years, and we hope would become a member institution. And I know there's a strategy for that. I'm going to ask my colleague, Ms. Wicker, to talk about, before that, let me just ask for any reactions before I ask Ms. Wicker to tell her story. The idea of organizing institutions. Any reactions to that? Any thoughts? Eduardo, Raul, Jasmine?
No, I mean, it makes sense. More numbers, so you can reach more people, get your idea across.
Right.
Pretty smart, actually.
Think about this. So what institution was crucial in the civil rights movement organizing?
I mean,
Where were a lot of
churches
the
and
big meetings?
schools.
Churches, okay, congregations, okay. There was a moral voice, but it was also where members of the African American community had leadership posts and had a pulpit, or had ministries, or had networks, okay, where they had power. Okay, so Ms. Wicker, why don't you talk about, you were involved in getting our most recent member institution to join. Can you tell that story?
Sure, thank you so much. Again, my name is Catherine Wicker, and I'm an organizer with Central Texas Interfaith. Over the past 2 years, leaders in Hays County have diligently worked with elected officials and an organization, Mono Amiga, to get a public defender's office in Hays County. After hearing and researching about the long trial wait times and how the county was spending taxpayer dollars to transport people awaiting trial, so they were not convicted of any crime at that time, to be housed in other cities' jails at high cost dollars. leaders from Central Texas Interfaith and the organization Mono Amiga came together to get a public defender's office. The public defender's office just passed in July, which is going to lead to a more just system for people to go through. The partnership with Mono Amiga is crucial for Corridor because it's not a church institution. It reaches other people within our community. It is a specific organization that focuses on criminal justice reform and immigration. In addition, many of the staff come from diverse backgrounds that are different from our current institution members. Since this victory with Mono Amiga, they have become a member with Central Texas Interfaith and is paying dues to build their own core team to continue to organize together with the partnership in the corridor.
So I think that that's a good example of, you know, our congregations and congregations in general, often with some exceptions, a lot of times tend to be, you know, my age and older with, and then maybe their kids of families. An exception might be, you know, some of our congregations with lots of immigrants, or some have young families. But frankly, getting into working with schools was, I was not at that time part of a religious congregation. I was just a teacher at Johnston. And so I wouldn't have gotten involved unless they wanted to move beyond just working with churches. Now nonprofits are a place like Mono Amiga where we are looking for talent. We want people with different backgrounds. The staff tends to be very young. Okay, so it gives us age diversity, gives us, in Hayes County, our congregations tend to be mostly Anglo down there. A little different from the east side of Austin, where I think we're much more diverse. So Mono Amiga is making the organization more diverse. So that's how we think about membership. We want to be diverse. We want to be broad-based. We want not just churches, but different kinds of organizations to really, you know, access a broader base of potential leaders and talent and ideas. And sometimes that brings diversity, and diversity brings tension. I mean, I meant to say that sometimes that brings tension, which comes with diversity. So we look for that. We don't want to be comfortable. We don't want to be all, you know, an all Hispanic organization, an all Anglo organization, an all retiree organization. Okay. All right. Let me, I'm going to just go through a couple more categories more quickly and just say, we think of leadership. We don't follow one charismatic leader. We don't follow just a small group of leaders. It's a diverse collective of leaders. We want a broad base, anywhere from 75 to 250 core leaders at any one time. And we want a team at each member institution, at Guadalupe, at Houston Tillotson. We don't just want one or two representatives. And we want that to reflect the diversity of the organization. And how do we, CTI leaders, I'll ask you this, how do we define a leader? What's the definition of a leader?
Someone with a following.
That's right. Someone with a following and can deliver it. So I always tell this kind of mythical story. These two folks don't exist in reality, but let's say we had a meeting on the east side, and one leader is Domingo, and Domingo is monolingual Spanish, is a recent immigrant. But every time Domingo comes to a meeting, he brings 15 or 20 people with him. That's one leader. And then another leader, let's say Rudy, he's an attorney, and he's written 5 books on law, and he knows all the movers and shakers in town, and he has lunch at the Headliners Club. Anyone hear of the Headliners Club? It's like the top story of some building downtown where all the muckety mucks go, all the business and political leaders go to have lunch. But when he comes to meetings on the east side, he always comes by himself, and that's it. So in our definition, who's the leader here? Domingo or Rudy? Domingo, that's right. Now, you know, we want Rudy as part of the organization because he might be able to learn from Domingo or some others on how to build a following, how to listen. But Domingo can also learn something from Rudy, okay? Maybe it's something about the law that impacts his community. But we really want people that have that ability to listen, to get at other people's interest so that they can develop a following and bring networks of people with them, okay? And, you know, with a broad-based organization, we look for different levels of leaders. Some leaders we call primary leaders that are looking to build the overall organization, raise money, look for talent, look for new leaders. We want some people that are mostly concerned about their institution, about Congregational Church or Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, and building power there. But to do that, they got to be, they're part of the organization CTI. And then we need lots and lots of tertiary leaders, which are people that come to us and want to know, give me a get out the vote list, I'll make calls, or I'll help set up a meeting. I was meeting with a leader the other day and said he started out as a tertiary leader. He would bring the breakfast tacos, he would help set up, but now he wants to learn how to run meetings and he wants to chair meetings. Okay. So now he wants to move into the secondary leader role. But we want a diverse collective. Money, money, think about in any kind of organization is ownership. And we talk about hard money versus soft money. We talked about dues. Hard money is money that our leaders raise and contribute themselves. Primarily, the most important is dues from the institution. Each of these institutions, each of these congregations here pays dues to the organization. It's their ownership. It's like union dues. Let me ask Monique or Carlota, would you share what Our Lady of Guadalupe pays in dues to the organization?
3,600. Oh, sorry, Carlota.
You got it.
3,600. And how do you get that money?
Yeah, so we get it through second collections and also individuals who are participating, but other institutions do it differently.
But it's bundled together and comes as the dues for Our Lady of Guadalupe. Okay.
And we have regular conversations about money.
Great. Joy?
At Congregational Church, our dues are $1,600 a year. We're a much smaller church, but it's a part of our church budget. Right. So it's voted on at the annual meeting every year.
That means Joy comes to the table when we're deciding on the agenda, and she has ownership in the organization, and she can say, I want us to think about this issue. Now, she's got to convince other people about it, but it gives her a say and ownership in the organization. So, we probably raise about $70,000 or $80,000 in dues from our institutions. We want that to be 150,000. Also, the leaders go out. Professor Sarissa was on several of these meetings and raise money from banks, hospitals, and corporations. No strings attached. We tell them, you're giving us the money to build communities, not to be, we're not going to agree with you on issues necessarily, but you're investing in this work. And then also individual donations. We want about 75% of our budget to be raised this way. We're not there yet. We're maybe more 50-50, a little less, but we want to get to where 3/4 of the organization. And we try to spend most of our budget on talent. That means leadership development, organizers that are developing leaders, sending people to trainings like this. And we don't want to have a lot of overhead. Okay. Any questions on either money or leadership?
I thought CTI worked with, community people who don't have a lot of money.
That's right. But
that sounds like it sounds like money though.
It is. It is. I mean, Our Lady of Guadalupe is not is a parish with a lot of immigrants and working class families. We had a community in Bastrop. We have a group of leaders in Bastrop, a small Catholic church. Then there was a community on Caldwell Road that wanted to organize because every time it rained, the bridge where their kids would come home on school buses or the parents would go to work would just flood over, and then it would just wipe away whatever the cars crossed over. It wasn't even a formal bridge. And we said you gotta be part of an institution to join. So that community decided, they created an institution. They didn't have a church that they all belonged to. They called it, what is it called, Monique? Area Rurales Unidas?
Yeah, Arias Rurales.
So rural areas united.
Unidos, I think.
Yep. And they literally passed the hat and raised money to pay dues. And then, we worked with them to meet with their county commissioner We have pictures of it, and now they have they filled in the ditch so that they can cross over. They had to go about an hour out of the way every time it rained to get to school. Okay, it gave them ownership. Now, is their dues the same as Congregational Church or Guadalupe? No, but it gave them a feeling that they had a claim on the organization. Okay, so yes. Now, you know, it's a sliding scale. So some congregations, we have a wealthier congregation in South Austin that, you know, that at one point was paying $8,000 in dues. A health clinic pays $10,000 in dues. So it's a sliding scale based on the budget. But think of it as ownership and how you build power. Because we say power comes in two forms: organized money and organized people. Okay, let me, a couple more things I just want to cover, and then issues. So, you know, in a movement, there tends to be one issue. It's coalesced around civil rights or LGBT rights or women's rights, or you know, on the other end of the political spectrum, you would put the MAGA, the Make America Great Again movement, or the Tea Party movement. There's one kind of idea that you're kind of coalescing around. In civic organizations, tend to be very, very local issues that are just specific to one community. In broad-based organizing, we want a broad agenda of issues, okay? We want a multi-issue organization, at least 5, 6, 7 key issues. Why would that be beneficial to a broad-based organization? Why would you know, sometimes someone will say to us, let's just focus on one thing this year, just one thing. And we never do that. We say you got to focus on priorities, but it's got to be 4, 5, or 6 things. Why would it be in our interest to focus on several issues as an organization?
I believe it's a bigger opportunity.
Opportunity for what? In what ways could it be an opportunity?
To make things happen.
Okay. So you can have a bigger impact, policy, or
Yes.
different communities. Okay. What else is it going to do if you work on a broad range of issues?
Someone's gonna have to relate. Someone's gonna want to do something about it.
That's right. And so if you're working on several issues, you get a lot of people to the table, and they tend to have diverse interests and backgrounds. So there might be a group working on community policing or police reform. There might be a group working on job training, workforce development. There might be a group working on HBCU funding. Okay. So hopefully we're attracting a lot of people to the table. Anything else? Just realize in most communities, a lot of these issues connect and intersect. And if we're only thinking about affordable housing, but we're not thinking about wages and making sure people earn a living wage or a family supporting wage, then we're only looking at one piece of the equation. Okay. If wages aren't going up and we're, we're not addressing affordability from both ends. Okay. I'm going to ask Ms. Garcia to tell a story on a key issue we have focused on this last year, and why, why that was, what that has done for the organization.
Fair enough. Thank you. My name is Carlota Garcia. I'm a leader with Our Lady Guadalupe Catholic Church, and my church, along with Ebenezer Baptist and Holy Cross Catholic in the HT area neighborhoods, we were founding members of Austin Interfaith, which is the predecessor to Central Texas Interfaith. So at the beginning of this year, after years of advocating for affordability on behalf of people experiencing homelessness or about to experience homelessness, we knew that our city and our county was about to receive hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding. We met separately with the Travis County judge and with the city of Austin mayor. And we learned that they were both open to ensuring that they're, that putting in $100 million respectively towards homelessness prevention and support. And given that our university area congregations were struggling with the issue because they were there, right front and center, You know, it's something that both the clergy and lay leaders like myself cared about. And so we decided it was worthwhile to dig in. So we began to have long and hard conversations with each county commissioner, conversations that involved a lot of back and forth. We cut short one of the meetings by telling the commissioner that we liked that they were willing to put in $50 million into homelessness, but that it wasn't enough, and that we were still going to publicly call on all of the commissioners to support $100 million in funding for homelessness. That was hard to say to an ally who had backed us on a number of issues over the last few decades, but we needed them to know that we were serious. So after these conversations, soon after, one of our clergy testified at a commissioners meeting asking for support to spend at least $100 million. And that same East Side commissioner spoke up and said they were ready to make a commitment. Within weeks of that, the County Commissioners Court unanimously voted to approve $110 million to build new housing for people experiencing homelessness. There's still going to be lots of work to do. We got to ensure that appropriate projects get the support that they need and that they get approved. But we're heartened with the power that our institutions, we're able to secure the funding to address the hard reality that our brothers and sisters are facing daily. This would not have been possible without institutional power, and it wouldn't have been impossible without a broad-based organization to pull us together and point us in unity in this direction.
If I could just interrupt for a moment, you know, I mean, did you say $150 million?
I said $110 million from the county, and it was also another $106 million from the city in federal dollars.
I want to just get my mind around this. You were in a meeting where you said to somebody, I want you to commit $110 million to this, that, or the other thing. Those words came out of your mouth.
Yeah, and these commissioners said no.
Until they said yes.
Until they said yes. I need to say, at first they said no. And one commissioner, you know, they threw every excuse in the book at us. And one commissioner said, well, the best I can do is 50 million. And
You know,
we had to say that wasn't enough.
I personally hope that I live long enough to say that to somebody. Give my issue $150 million. You see where I'm going here, family, right? Wouldn't that feel nice to get those words out of your mouth? Okay.
Ms. Garcia, can I ask you what, in terms of any of the things we talked about, what, in addition to it being an important policy, because you just living in Austin the last year and a half, you know that it had become a real issue for those experiencing homelessness, but why was this an important issue for the organization, other than just the importance of the policy?
I mean, it was an issue that brought different clusters together. I mentioned the central cluster, you know, but folks on the east side, leaders on the east side, I mean, our family members, we get calls from family, we get calls from fellow parishioners like, hey, do you know where somebody can crash? They've just been evicted or they're about to lose their home. I mean, so it brought together people, I guess, a diversity of folks. It brought in new people. I mean, there were new clergy that came to the table, and there were new parishioners that stepped in because they cared about it but didn't know of a way to act on it. And so it brought in different people as well. So it was, you know, it was a way to bring together a lot of different kinds of folks to work on something together.
Great. And one thing that came to mind is you were telling the story is the difference between problems and issues. When we do listening sessions, small group house meetings, we're looking for problems. Okay, homelessness is a problem, affordability is a problem. But once and everyone agrees homelessness is a problem and we should do something about it and we should solve it, and yes. But once you put a dollar amount and once you say to somebody, you are responsible and we're going to hold you responsible, city council member. Now, who's responsible for homelessness? We all are. So in organizing, you got to pick somebody. So we decided to say, county officials, you're responsible for 100 million, and mayor and city council, you're responsible for 100 million. And there were some very tense moments, very tense press releases, very tense meetings, like the one that Ms. Garcia talked about, the same at the city level. And we were not like the city council for a good while, and especially the folks that were holding it up. But once the county moved and that key person where we created tension moved, that money freed up and it became much harder for the city to say no. And by the end, you know, even though, you know, they begrudged us recognition, we finally made them give us recognition for it. Now those who we created tension with are sitting down with us and telling us, you were key to this. It was important that you put the pressure on. We didn't like it, you know, but we got it done. And so picking an issue is picking you know, not just the policy, but how much do you want to fight for and who are you going to hold responsible? And you just got to pick somebody that has some power and hold their feet to the fire and don't let them kind of play the shell game.
Were you, Carlota, were you scared? Weren't you a little bit scared?
I mean, was I scared? I mean, I think I was emboldened by the fact that it was possible, right? We didn't choose 100 million out of nowhere. We didn't show up last year and be like, hey, we want you to throw $100 million at this. Like, we knew there was federal dollars on the table, hundreds of millions of federal dollars on the table, one-time shot. We knew it was possible. And I think that emboldened us. I mean, were we scared? I was nervous, right? I'm not an a-hole, or I try not to be one. And so I kind of had to be one, and that was not fun. How about this? It wasn't that I was scared, but it was not fun. There were lots of fun after we win, and there's lots of fun with every single vote that changes. But in the moment, I think it's challenging, right?
And if I could also mention, our institutions do have values. And so you find yourself as a leader recognizing the importance of these issues and how they do go to your values, what you really believe is important and worth the effort and worth fighting for and worth walking out of a meeting if it's not working.
And that gives you courage. That gives you courage, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I think if there was any fear among us and the leaders, it was we had built these relationships with council, and we knew if we did what Dr. Penikoff just said, we were risking those relationships, and we had to at some point say the value and what we were fighting for was more important. We may risk a relationship with this council member, but we're going to have to do it. And it, you know, you broke some eggshells or whatever that metaphor is. But the second we won, we went back and did a round of meetings. And those who we created tension with, you know, they got to claim part of the victory too, because they eventually voted for it. And we rebuilt that relationship immediately. And so, you know, we say in organizing, you've got to polarize sometimes, which means you're telling someone you're responsible. Personalizing and polarizing. Personalizing says to a council member or a mayor, you're responsible. Polarizing in that moment means you're saying you're totally responsible. If you don't vote for this, it's not going to happen. We need your vote. And then immediately after the victory or after the action, you depolarize. You meet with them and you talk through it and you move the relationship forward. And that's what we had to do. So if there was any fear, it was we're risking relationships we built up, but they had the courage to do it. So I just think that's how we think about issues is how do we build from them? How do we pick things that are winnable? Not always winnable, but most of the time we want it to be within reach. But this one, we knew it was the right thing and we rolled the dice and we won on it. So, okay. I'm gonna close up here just by saying a few final words. A lot of organizations, action is the be all and the end all. We do action just to win stuff, and that's part of it. But we think about actions as a way to develop leaders. And we always do a pre-meeting, and we also evaluate. After this meeting, those who put it together will evaluate. We think of this as an action. It's not like a city council meeting, but it's a training action. And we evaluate, okay, who seemed engaged, who seemed interested, was this useful for, and we'll ask you too, how did you feel about this training? So actions are a way.
Doug, this meeting is an action for you guys?
Yes.
This meeting is an action.
A training is an action. A small group listening session or house meeting is an action. A one-on-one relationship building meeting is an action. But also a big assembly with the mayor is an action. A press conference is an action. And an action is anything that is thought through and calculated to get a reaction. The reaction might be a relationship. The reaction might be to understand a little more about what the issues you face are. It may be about changing a mayor's vote, but everything we do, we try to plan and then we learn from it. Well, maybe in one session, students didn't seem engaged. There was no one responding when we asked questions. That wasn't the case tonight, but that's something, if that's the case, we got to evaluate that. Why did that happen? Were we not interesting enough? Did we have not the right team? So an action is to develop leaders. And there's an article I'll list here. It's called Democracy as a Universal Value by this guy, Indian writer Amartya Sen. He's a Nobel Prize winner for his work on democracy and how it relates to eradicating poverty. And he says there's basically 3 universal values to participation in democracy, in politics, the kind we're talking about. One is instrumental. Think of the homelessness issue. We gained over $200 million in funding to eradicate homelessness. So democracy is about fighting for stuff, for communities, for addressing issues. So that's the instrumental value. There's we're fighting for stuff. He also says there's an intrinsic value. So whether it is Ms. Garcia or Dr. Penikoff or an organizer that goes into one of those meetings a little fearful that they're going to hurt a relationship or they're going to hurt someone's feelings, but goes forward anyway, maybe gain some courage and perspective after that meeting. Judgment. So there's things we better ourselves as public people through action. So we want to grow as individuals. That's the intrinsic value. And then there's the thing called the constructive value. We can literally shape values of our city, of our society, like fighting for this thing called living wages. Well, there's a minimum wage, but a living wage is higher than that. It's what a family needs to earn to live in dignity, to be able to support the whole family, to save money for school, to have a dignified place to live. Living wages are a constructed value, okay? What are some other values? The dignity of owning a home, that everybody should have access to a home, is a value, okay? Not everyone believes that. A lot of people think homeless people are lazy or they just want to live out in parks and in the woods. Well, that's not a value we subscribe to. So you can shape the values.
How about quality education that is affordable?
That's right.
Quality education is affordable to people, especially the kind of people that we're talking about, communities that that send their children to HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
HBCUs could be more affordable if we had support.
That's right. That's right. In the Texas Constitution, all it says for public schools, K through 12, it needs to be an adequate education. It doesn't say it needs to be quality, So you got to fight for that idea of what a quality education is. That's something higher than the minimum required by law. You're not going to get that unless you have power and you develop power and you organize for it and fight for that value and say, HBCUs need to be well-funded, students need to have financial access to them, and it needs to be a quality education. Okay. And the tools we use, we mentioned some of them, the small group listening sessions, our house meetings, individual relationship building meetings, understanding someone's self-interest, and then public action. Okay. But we always evaluate. Okay. I am going to stop there. and ask, before we go into the next steps, any reactions to this conversation on broad-based organizing, and then we'll move into our next steps. I may call on a few of you here. Ciara, any reactions to this conversation? Anything particularly interesting?
Well, I think the whole idea of like the importance of broad-based organizing, like you get different perspectives, you know, you open your programs to different views and you get more people to, you know, to, what is the word? To participate. So I never realized, I think you guys were talking about it. I didn't realize, you know, the different like opportunities you get when you open your to different institutions that have different networks, different people that are involved. I don't know, just the whole thing about learning about it and the whole process was interesting to me. So that's why I always put like, you know, the clapping hands or the, you know, the thumbs up, because I didn't realize how important it was in the work you guys were doing. So that's my thoughts.
And look, it's because of that, it's a slower process, you know, to work across lines of different types of institutions. But we think that's what makes it more sustainable over the long term. That's why CTI has been here 30, 40 years by now. Okay, other reactions? Timothy, Wendell?
I just feel like it's so exciting to see the power we can all create to help people who really need the help. It's just so exciting. It's just something that catches my attention and something that interests me a lot.
Great, great. Yeah, kudos to the storytellers. The stories of the victories are. How many hours went into that homeless victory? ask Monique, Carlota. Some of you have.
For Carlota.
Yes, go ahead.
What excuses did they give you? You said they gave you excuses to not, you know, fund. What were they?
We have other priorities that the money can go towards. There's other people that need that money, or I don't trust so-and-so to do their part to hold up their end of the deal. I mean, there were a lot.
Mention the contingency fund, because
Yeah.
that was one big excuse not to spend money.
Yeah, I'm trying to speak in vague terms, but yes, the contingency fund was a huge one. The city had put on handcuffs, basically. They initially said, we'll throw down $100 million, but only if other funders produce another 200 million. And so, you know, the county wasn't excited about that. The commissioners named it as an issue. So we, yeah.
What more important things are there than people sleeping on the streets?
That is exactly the question that was bounced back to them.
Like, that's not ethical. That's not, it doesn't make sense to me, I feel like.
Yes. And I think that's part of what's missing. A lot of these folks have become separated from the realities that many of our families deal with, or just people, like they don't have to deal with.
Why are people in power that are in power like that? Why can't they relate to common people like us?
Because there's not enough. Well, there's lots of reasons, right? One of them is that there's not enough of us getting in their face and revealing to them the realities that we see. It's not the only reason. There's lots of other reasons, but one of them is that there's not enough of us getting in their face.
I think
we're always thinking about growing and expanding.
I think, Jordan, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I just had a quick question. So we kind of discussed the funding, like coming from the city and city council and like bigger group, like formal government people. Does CTI ever try to collect funds from like other corporations within like Austin City or stuff like that? Because we see Tesla moving to the city of Austin. Does CTI raise funds from companies like that to invest in y'all's plan?
Yeah, I mean, I can take a crack at it. I mean, we have received and we do receive funding from like some banks. From HEB, for example, from AT&T. We make very clear to them that we're not, that we may take a position on something that is against something that they're trying to promote, but we will let them know ahead of time that we're going to take a position. So it's very clear that they're not influencing our agenda. And they can be partners. Some of them have been partners with us on fights for workforce development dollars or for job training dollars. When dealing with the state legislature, some of our funders have been supporters. So, I mean, that's part of our hard money. That's part of the money that allows us to operate independently. How did you?
And I think, and that's, we're talking about raising our money, but when we go out and fight for money for job training or homelessness, we don't get any of that. That goes right to the programs we're fighting for. We have less leverage when it comes to the private sector because, the public sector folks are elected and to be stewards of our tax dollars. But, what we do is make sure that anytime we do have leverage with private corporations, like if they want a tax break, Tesla wanted a big tax break. And so we said you had to, if you get a tax break from the county, you had to pay at least $15 with benefits and do these things. At one point, we asked Samsung to kick money into a job training. They had to put so much of their tax dollars into job training. We just don't have the same leverage with private sector, institutions to invest in homelessness that we do. And we believe that, housing is a public good. It's a good that we should help fund as an entity. Now, the city council went out and they tried to raise private dollars. But we said you can't hold up the city's money to wait around for that. That may be more than you were asking, Jordan, but.
That was awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. Okay. Any other reactions before we go to next steps? Realize we can lay out these are ideals. We want to be 75% raising money from dues and corporations. We want to have a broad base of leaders. We're not always there. Sometimes we operate like a civic organization where it's a small group of leaders and organizers that go to everything. Sometimes we're not as broad-based institutionally as we want to be. But at least that's our kind of standard that we hold ourselves to. And we always judge when we audit ourselves, how well are we living up to these things? Okay. And where do we need to improve? Okay. I want to turn this over and thank, first of all, our leaders, Dr. Penikoff and Carlota, for sharing their stories, and Monique and Catherine as well, because those were, those tell the story better than any slide I can show. So great work. It reminds me a lot of the work we did this year. But the question now is, where do we go from here? And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sarissa, Dr. Penikoff to talk about our next steps.
Well, I was doing this because I just wanted to ask folks to give hands to our leaders, the organizers who gave us such a session tonight. Thank you so much. That was good stuff. Good stuff. Next step, Dr. Penikoff, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you very much. As y'all may be aware, given that you're in Professor Sarissa's class, you may have heard that Houston Tillotson is hosting a conference of all of the Texas HBCUs, April 1st and 2nd of 2022. And one of the goals of that conference is to create conversations with lawmakers, with Texas lawmakers, about strategies for increasing the resources of Texas HBCUs, both private and state. And so we are doing the planning for this conference right now. And I understand that you, as Professor Ceresa's students, are going to be given an opportunity to be involved in this conference. So Professor Ceresa, can I turn it back over to you? And maybe you can build on that in terms of your expectations.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Penikoff. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you, because Dr. Penikoff is an academic who has lots of experience, and she's been giving us her expertise, and it's been such a resource. And so I want you to get your mind around what you heard tonight, because I think we can make something happen for our institutions. And do you know the impact it would have to be able to open our doors to more of us? I mean, our HBCUs can do more for students we have now and do more for more students if we had the support that we deserve. And when I hear stories about the accomplishments, I think maybe we could do this, right? And so we have found the courage, and we have developed a plan, and we're going for it. And it begins April 1st and April 2nd, but it's going to take a lot of work to get there and to show up and be impressive on April 1st and April 2nd. And so I want to invite you to think about your development as a leader through participation in this kind of thing. This conference is going to be, I think, potentially really important to do the kinds of things that you heard about here tonight. But we can't do it without, it's going to take leadership. It's going to take leadership. Yeah. Did I leave anything out, Dr. Penikoff?
I think you covered it so beautifully. And I would just like to say, for those of y'all who are sort of new to the notion of getting involved in this democratic process, I never had any of this in school. I trained as a nurse, and I taught nursing. And so I know a lot about academics, but when I got involved with Central Texas Interfaith, I started at the very bottom, and they taught me. And CTI is all about teaching people who want to help make change, have the skills to do it. And you guys, it's all for you. Y'all are the ones. And that's one reason why I am so delighted that I'm a part of the planning for the conference.
Now, Dr. Cereso, do you want to talk about, it's kind of related to this under the kind of umbrella of HBCU funding, but the United Negro College Fund initiative with Congress?
So the conference is going to be an opportunity for us to develop these kinds of skills and have the kinds of experiences that Carlota is talking about. I mean, can you imagine sitting down with a lawmaker together with us and asking for the kinds of money and the support that's going to make a difference? This is going to be a great opportunity for us to learn, for us to learn and to grow. But that conference is in April, and it's going to take some planning, but there's things happening now in politics and in public policy that really impact the bottom line for our institution, for America's HBCUs. And that's the UNCF Ignite. That's the UNCF Ignite line you see on this slide here. Congress is right now in the process of negotiating legislation as a part of the President Biden's reconciliation and the Build Back Better. These are policy initiatives on the national level, and one is directly connected to this future of HBCUs, and that's the UNCF Ignite campaign. United Negro College Fund is is organizing around this policy process, and the university wants to contribute to policy that'll promote our interests. And so we're going to be working with CTI. University is going to be working with CTI to build some leadership around local leadership around UNCF Ignite and the policy, federal policy making that impacts HBCUs along the way.
If I could add to that, the fact that this year, is an election year coming up, that there's not only the sitting Congress people we could be meeting with, but candidates, they've redistricted, and, there's all these kind of new seats or new configurations that we could make that part of meetings with candidates for Congress as well, and ask that question.
And I can see Ciara Franklin chairing a meeting with the person who wants to be Congress, representing Congress. I can see Timothy chairing a meeting with a person who wants to be a member of Congress. I can see Raul. What a fabulous opportunity that would be.
Congressional District 37, which is the east side of Austin, used to be represented by Lloyd Doggett. He's moving over to a new congressional seat to run in central Austin. So there's lots of candidates that are lining up for this east side district. So it's your opportunity, to not pit them against each other, but when someone's running for office, they're more likely to aim to please and get their commitments. Okay, and then through our work over the last year or two, and then through conversations that Dr. Sharissa has had with some of you and others, understanding that community policing and policing issues are an important issue for students to work on. So I know there's a proposal, but just wanted to ask Monique Vasquez to give a little background on our work on this. That has involved some HT students in the last year, but also a broader organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things is when I was a leader, I was invited to this really impressive civic academy that Central Texas Interfaith leaders put on. And so Central Texas Interfaith really has been working on community policing for years, and in particular, really about racial inequities. And so there's been multiple things that have come out of this. Prop A is definitely a recent example of, a reaction, and we had key leaders who were involved in the community policing, in the community policing area, who decided that they wanted to take action. But other things that we have done is hosting large civic academies where leaders teach, and that also involve members of the police force and citizens and the Office of Police Oversight, along with, community members and members of our congregations, so that they can have dialogue with one another about the issues that they see in their communities. So those have been key. Our leaders have been asked and have had meetings with the Office of Police Oversight to talk about issues that they're seeing in their community. And leaders also have pushed for and won racial equity training among incoming cadet classes. Another thing I want to highlight is in Bastrop, this group of immigrants fought against racial profiling, and at some point put enough pressure on the sheriff that he stopped. They were being stopped by and it was like the majority of folks with Hispanic surnames were being stopped and profiled. And that also, as Doug says, issues intersect. And so that led to a pretty impressive Get Out the Vote campaign in Bastrop. So there's multiple ways that community policing could be involved. But I also think it starts with conversations and really coming together and seeing, what you as students really want to work on.
Professor Sarissa, what's your proposal for a next step with that conversation?
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is bring us together to have a planning session for November that would articulate or identify some things that we could do together to begin to, develop our leadership around these issues. And Zakara Bryson she talked a lot about, she went to the Civic Academy on community policing, and we've had conversations and with other students too. And the feeling is that, we could actually see some progress. We could do something about community policing. And so we want to come together to hash that out and do some actions in November that'll give us some experience and move the ball down the field. And so I'd like for us to come together as soon as Monday to plan some actions that can be opportunities for us to grow as leaders, take on new roles, and begin this process of working together to build power. So I'm going to be asking students to come together on Monday for a campus strategy on HBCU funding and community policing.
It's the right time because there is a new chief. The interim chief, Chacon, was named not permanent, but the full-time chief now. Prop A did not pass, so there's not going to be these mandates from above. So it's up to us to work, and up to y'all to work with the city to figure out the kind of public safety that you want and how those relationships would look. All right, I think that brings us to time for tonight.
So, you've given us so much food for thought. My brain is spinning about all the possibilities, and I'm really looking forward to next steps, and just want to thank you guys. Jimena, do you have any reactions? I wish we had more time to hear from you guys, but if I had to pick one, Jimena, any reactions before we close?
I'm still stuck on what we talked about with Carlota. I don't know. It just makes me think it just makes me want to be more involved. Like if more people, more common people were involved, and I feel like we could make a really, really big change and not just have perspectives from people up here, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's exactly right. That, and the picture that I have in my mind from hearing all this stuff is that, we could actually do that. How about you, Raul, before we go?
I'm just excited for what's to come. I really am. I want to be more involved and just make things happen.
Timothy?
Yeah, same. Just, hearing from the organizations, how everything is constructed and being built, and how everybody's working hard, connections that everybody's making, for a good change, to make change and to see it happen is really amazing. So just listening and just, I'm ready to definitely get involved, especially coming, when is the meeting? You said next year, 2022?
Yeah.
April 1st and 2nd.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much, CTI leaders.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
If the planning team could stay on.
Hey, Robert, you probably want to stop
Yeah.
recording before we do the evaluation.
Thank you.
Did we have our whole team here? Okay. Once we stop recording, we'll evaluate.
Yeah.